introduce our teacher for the next 2 Sundays.
What a privilege. I think judging by the size of our crowd this morning, everybody already knows Errol and Errol Rohr. We seem to be standing room only, but there are chairs down, I think, down the hall if you want to claim one and find a space up in the front. Our committee has met once. It's the easiest committee that you can be on, and I invite, we're looking for anybody new to help us plan. I'm going to step down, and so we need someone else who has some organizational skills. That's all it takes. And the ability to send some emails. Please let one of us know if you're interested in helping us plan for next year, and those of you who are interested in suggesting teachers or topics, please also contact me or Drake or Mary D. We are going to welcome Errol Rohr and Karen this morning, who are going to be talking about Inklings of Fantasy and Faith from C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia. This is a one-off presentation. They were so kind to offer. They have done it before in other venues, is that right? And next week, Errol will be back to talk about Jesus Christ and some artistic masterpieces. So that will be a visual and spiritual treat for all of us. In October, we have, or the end of September and beginning of October, we are going to focus on the East End and the mission work that is ongoing in the East End, where we have volunteers from our church and other churches in the community going to George Mason Elementary. That whole area is really on fire in terms of the changes that are happening in that community and for those people in terms of job creation, in terms of outreach. Murray Withrow, a Servant Partners, will be speaking at the end of September, and Reggie Gordon and Deb Lawrence will be speaking the 1st of October. Reggie, as you know, is formerly the CEO of the Red Cross, and he's now Mayor Stoney's architect of community wealth building and job creation. So please look forward to welcoming them. The end of October and 1st of November, we'll have Mark Biddle from the Baptist Theological Seminary. Mark is a favorite. He speaks without notes. He's got such a tremendous command of what he talks about. And he will be speaking on understanding Israel's biblical and historical claim to Jerusalem. So bring your questions for him. We'll round out November before Thanksgiving with a repeat visit by Rabbi Creditor. He was very popular last year. And he will also give kind of his vantage point as a practicing Jew and rabbi on the Israel-Palestine divide. In December, Reverend John Miller, who's a member of our class and former rector of St. Mary's Episcopal Church, longtime rector there, will be our teacher. In February, we'll welcome Sam Adams, and he's going to give us a lively opportunity to discuss the Bible and American political discourse. And Sam talks fast, so you're going to have to drink your coffee that morning and be ready with your questions. In March, we're going to bring back Art Wright, who is also at the Baptist Theological Seminary. Sam, for those of you who may not know, is on the Union Presbyterian faculty. But Art Wright will be talking about the afterlife. In April, Stuart Nixon will be with us for a couple of weeks. And then Errol will be back to round out our year to finish his wonderful presentation on a portion of the Gospel of Mark. You know, he's been doing that for us the last couple of terms. And he really leaves us spellbound. And I'm sure you will do that again. No pressure. So we have a wonderful year ahead. Look forward to seeing many of you here. I know there will be other exciting opportunities, but I hope that with the variety that we have on tap for you, that you'll be excited about being together on Sunday morning. And welcome back. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Oh, yeah.
Is it time?
Yes.
So it's good to be with you this morning, and I think you're going to enjoy Karen's readings. When our children were growing up, Karen would read to us in the evenings from the Chronicles of Narnia, and I was spellbound by the way she read. I just want to warn you, there are some really scary parts. So our presentation this morning about fantasy and faith is based on the writings of C.S. Lewis, Clive Staples Lewis, a literature professor, as many of you know, at Magdalen College, Oxford University. And since I think Lewis is known as a man and a scholar and a writer by most of you, I won't go into his biography. We'll save that for maybe some other time, and his remarkable theological influence on the church over the last so many decades. And the writings we're particularly interested in this morning are his series of children's books, although they're really for adults, called the Chronicles of Narnia. In a letter to fifth graders, Lewis describes what he is really up to in these 7 books. And I want to read this letter to fifth graders to you. It'll give you an insight into Lewis as a human being. He was this renowned scholar, an amazing intellect, but he could also write to fifth graders in a way that I think will really surprise you. He didn't dumb it down for these children. So this is a letter written from Magdalen College, Oxford University, May 29th, 1954. Dear fifth graders. Children would write Lewis all the time, and he would take the time to respond to them. Dear fifth graders, I'm so glad you like the Narnia books, and it was very kind of you to write me and tell me about it. There are to be 7 of them altogether, and you are already 1 behind. Number 4, the silver chair, is already out. You are mistaken when you think that everything in the books represents something in this world. Things do that in the Pilgrim's Progress. I hope they looked it up and started reading the Pilgrim's Progress. But I'm not writing in that way. I did not say to myself, let us represent Jesus as he really is in our world by a lion in Narnia. I said, let us suppose that there were a land like Narnia, and that the Son of God, as he became a man in our world, became a lion there, and then imagine what would happen. If you think about it, you will see that it is quite a different thing. So the answer to your first 2 questions is that Reepicheep and Nickabrick don't, in that sense, represent anyone. But of course, anyone in our world who devotes his whole life to seeking heaven will be like Reepicheep. And anyone who wants some worldly thing so badly that he is ready to use wicked means to get it will be likely to behave like Nickabrick. I'm tall, fat, rather bald, not me, but Lewis. Red-faced, double-chinned, black-haired, and have a deep voice and wear glasses for reading. The only way for us to get to Aslan's country is through death, as far as I know. Perhaps some very good people get just a tiny glimpse before then. Best love to you all. When you say your prayers, sometimes ask God to bless me. C.S. Lewis. The title of our presentation this morning is Inklings of Fantasy and Faith. The word inkling has a double meaning. On the one hand, it means a slight suggestion, a hint, an intimation. On the other hand, it refers to a group of writers, namely C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien, Charles Williams, and a few others, most of whom were professors at Oxford University. It sometimes included Dorothy Sayers, if you knew of her works. And they would often meet at either Magdalen College, Oxford University, or at a pub called the Eagle and Child, which these men dubbed the Bird and the Baby. When I was on sabbatical at Oxford University, I would often visit the Bird and the Baby, sit down, have a pint, and read from Lewis or Tolkien or Williams, just to get a flavor of what it must have been like in that pub. The other two words in our title, fantasy and faith. Fantasy is a literary term, and according to Lewis, it's any narrative that deals with impossibles or events outside the ordinary course of nature. And Lewis sees fantasy as an alternative to the real world. He says it's better to battle fire-breathing dragons than to be mugged in downtown Richmond, for example, or to be, as he puts it, called out of the shower. And in describing the importance of fantasy, Lewis writes, and this is one of my favorite phrases of Lewis, when lost in the woods, the sight of a signpost is a great matter. And fantasy gives us signposts. He even believes that fantasy can help us rediscover ourselves in a fresher and more realistic way. And for our purposes this morning, fantasy can give us a clarity on matters of faith, even an inkling of the relevance of faith in our daily lives. As the theologian Paul Tillich suggests, faith is a state of ultimate concern, and fantasy is mainly about things that concern us ultimately. Karen and I have selected out of all the books, the 7 books, and out of all the themes that are in those books, Karen and I have selected 4 faith-based themes. The first theme is our hunger or our longing for God, or Lewis terms it Sehnsucht, which is a German phrase. The second theme is the atonement. The third theme is the resurrection. And the fourth and final theme is the new creation in Christ. So without any further ado, the best part of this presentation, I now present Dr. Karen Rohr.
Reading is from the Silver Chair, Longing for God, Psalm 42:1. As the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you, O my God. Jill's thirst was very bad now, and she plucked up her courage to go and look for that running water. She went on tiptoes, stealing cautiously from tree to tree and stopping to peer around at every step. The wood was so still that it was not difficult to decide where the sound was coming from. It grew clearer every moment, and sooner than she expected, she came to an open glade and saw the stream, bright as glass, running across the turf a stone's throw away from her. But although the sight of the water made her feel 10 times thirstier than before, she didn't rush forward and drink. She stood as still as if she had been turned into stone with her mouth wide open. And she had a very good reason. Just on this side of the stream lay the lion. It lay with its head raised and its two forepaws out in front of it like the lions in Trafalgar Square. She knew at once that it had seen her, for its eyes looked straight into hers for a moment and then turned away, as if it knew her quite well and didn't think much of her. If I run away, it'll be after me in a moment. And if I go on, I shall run straight into its mouth. Anyway, she couldn't have moved if she had tried, and she couldn't take her eyes off it. How long this lasted, she could not be sure. It seemed like hours. And the thirst became so bad that she almost felt that she would not mind being eaten by the lion, if only she could be sure of getting a mouthful of water first. If you're thirsty, you may drink. They were the first words she had heard since Scrub had spoken to her on the edge of the cliff. For a second, she stared here and there, wondering who had spoken. Then the voice said again, "If you are thirsty, come and drink." And of course, she remembered what Scrub had said about animals talking in the other world, and realized it was the lion speaking. Anyway, she had seen its lips move this time, and the voice was not like a man's. It was deeper, wilder, and stronger, a sort of heavy, golden voice. It did not make her any less frightened than she had been before, but it made her frightened in a rather different way. "Are you not thirsty?" said the lion. "I'm dying of thirst," said Jill. "Then drink," said the lion. Would you mind going away a while if I do?" The lion answered this only by a look and a very low growl. And as Jill gazed at its motionless bulk, she realized that she might as well have asked the whole mountain to move aside for her convenience. The delicious rippling noise of the stream was driving her nearly frantic. "Will you promise not to do anything to me if I do come?" "I make no promise," said the lion. Jill was so thirsty now that without noticing it, she had come a step nearer. "Do you eat girls?" she asked. "I have swallowed up girls and boys, women and men, kings and emperors, cities and realms." It didn't say this as if it were boasting, nor as if it were sorry, nor as if it were angry. It just said it. "I daren't come and drink," said Jill. "Then you will die of thirst," said the lion. "Oh dear," said Jill, coming a step nearer. "I suppose I must go and look for another stream then." "There is no other stream," said the lion. The next two readings are from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. First, the Atonement. And Scripture, "For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. For the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life in Christ Jesus our Lord." But God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Forward they went again, and one of the girls walked on each side of the lion. But how slowly he walked. And his great royal head drooped so that his nose nearly touched the grass. Presently he stumbled and gave a low moan. Aslan, dear Aslan, said Lucy, what is wrong? Can't you tell us? Are you ill, dear Aslan? said Susan. No, said Aslan. I am sad and lonely. Lay your hands on my mane so that I can feel you are there, and let us walk like that. And so the girls did what they would have never have dared to do without his permission, but what they had longed to do ever since they first saw him. Buried their cold hands in the beautiful sea of fur and stroked it, and so doing, walked with him. And presently they saw that they were going with him up the slope of the hill on which the stone table stood. They went up at the side where the trees came further up, and when they got to the last tree, it was the one that had some bushes about it, Aslan stopped and said, "Oh, children, children, here you must stop. And whatever happens, do not let yourselves be seen. Farewell." And both the girls cried bitterly, though they hardly knew why, and clung to the lion and kissed his mane and his nose and his paws and his great sad eyes. Then he turned from them and walked out onto the top of the hill. And Lucy and Susan, crouching in the bushes, looked after him, and this is what they saw. A great crowd of people were standing all around the stone table, and though the moon was shining, many of them carried torches which burned with evil-looking red flames and black smoke. But such people, ogres with monstrous teeth, and wolves and bull-headed men, spirits of evil trees and poisonous plants, and other creatures about whom I won't describe, because if I did, the grown-ups would probably not let you read this book. Cruels and hags and incubuses, wraths, horrors, ifrits, sprites, orkneys, woozies, and etnas. In fact, there were all those who were on the witch's side and whom the wolf had summoned at her command. And right in the middle, standing by the table, was the witch herself. A howl and a gibber of dismay went up from the creatures when they first saw the great lion pacing towards them. And for a moment, the witch herself seemed to be struck with fear. Then she recovered herself and gave a wild, fierce laugh. "The fool!" she cried. "The fool has come! Bind him fast!" Lucy and Susan held their breaths, waiting for Aslan's roar and his spring upon his enemies. But it never came. 4 hags, grinning and leering, yet also at first hanging back and half afraid of what they had to do, had approached him. "Bind him, I say," white witch. The hags made a dart at him and shrieked with triumph when they found that he made no resistance at all. Then others, evil dwarfs and apes, rushed in to help them, and between them they rolled the huge lion round on his back and tied all 4 paws together, shouting and cheering as if they had done something brave. Though had the lion chosen, one of those paws would have been the death of them all. But he made no noise, even when the enemies, straining and tugging, pulled the cords so tight that they cut into his flesh. Then they began to drag him towards the stone table. "Stop," said the witch. "Let him first be shaved." Another roar of mean laughter went up from her followers as an ogre with a pair of shears came forward and squatted down by Aslan's head. Snip, snip, snip went the shears, and masses of curling gold began to fall to the ground. Then the ogre stood back, and the children watching from their hiding place could see the face of Aslan looking all small and different without its mane. The enemies also saw the difference. "Why, he's only a cat after all," cried one. "Is that what we were afraid of?" said another. And they surged around Aslan, jeering at him, saying things like, "Puss, puss, poor pussy. And how many mice have you caught today, cat? And would you like a saucer of milk, pussums?" "Oh, how can they?" said Lucy, tears streaming down her cheeks. The brutes, for now that the first shock was over, the shorn face of Aslan looked to her braver and more beautiful and more patient than ever. "Muzzle him," said the witch. And even now, as they worked about his face, putting on the muzzle, one bite from his jaws would have cost 2 or 3 of them their hands. But he never moved. And this seemed to enrage all that rabble. Everyone was at him now. Those who had been afraid to come near, even after he was bound, began to find their courage, and for a few minutes the 2 girls could not even see him. So thickly was he surrounded by the whole crowd of creatures, kicking him, hitting him, spitting on him, jeering at him. At last the rabble had had enough of this. They began to drag the bound and muzzled lion to the stone table, some pulling and some pushing. He was so huge that even when they got him there, it took all their efforts to hoist him onto the surface of it. Then there was more tying and tightening of cords. "The cowards! The cowards!" sobbed Susan. "Are they still afraid of him now? Even now?" When once Aslan had been tied, and tied so that he was really a mass of cords on the flat taped stone, a hush fell on the crowd. 4 hags holding 4 torches stood at the corners of the table. The witch bared her arms as she had bared them the previous night when it had been Edmund instead of Aslan. Then she began to whet her knife. It looked to the children when the gleam of the torchlight fell on it as if the knife were made of stone, not of steel, and it was of a strange and evil shape. At last she drew near. She stood by Aslan's head. Her face was working and twitching with passion, but his looked up at the sky, still quiet, neither angry nor afraid, but a little sad. Then just before she gave the blow, she stooped down and said in a quivering voice, "And now, who has won? Fool, do you think that by all this you would save the human traitor? Now I will kill you instead of him, as our pact was, and so the deep magic will be appeased. But when you are dead, what will prevent me from killing him as well? And who will take him out of my hand then? Understand that you have given me Narnia forever. You have lost your own life, and you have not saved his. In that knowledge, despair and die." The children did not see the actual moment of the killing. They couldn't bear to look and covered their eyes. The resurrection. Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live, even though he dies, and whoever lives and believes in me will never die." I want to know Christ and the power of his resurrection. I hope no one who reads this book has been quite as miserable as Susan and Lucy were that night. But if you have been, if you've been up all night and cried till you had no more tears left in you, you will know that there comes in the end a sort of quietness. You feel as if nothing was ever going to happen again. At any rate, that was how it felt to these two. Hours and hours seemed to go by in this dead calm, and they hardly noticed that they were getting colder and colder. But at last, Lucy noticed two other things. One was that the sky on the east side of the hill was a little less dark than it had been an hour ago. The other was some tiny movement going on in the grass at her feet. At first, she took no interest in this. What did it matter? Nothing mattered now. But at last she saw that whatever it was had begun to move up the upright stones of the stone table. And now, whatever they were moving about on Aslan's body. She peered closer. They were little gray things. "Ugh," said Susan from the other side of the table. "How beastly. They are horrid little mice crawling over him. Go away, you little beast." And she raised her hand to frighten them away. "Wait," said Lucy, who had been looking at them more closely. "Can't you see what they're doing?" Both girls bent down and stared. "I do believe," said Susan, "but how queer, they're nibbling away at the cords." That's what I thought, said Lucy. I think they're friendly mice. Poor little things, they don't realize he's dead. They think it'll do some good untying him. It was quite definitely lighter by now. Each of the girls noticed for the first time the white face of the other. They could see the mice nibbling away, dozens and dozens, even hundreds of little field mice. And at last, one by one, the ropes were all gnawed through. The sky in the east was whitish by now, and the stars were getting fainter, all except one very big one low down on the eastern horizon. They felt colder than they had been all night. The mice crept away again. The girls cleared away the remains of the gnawed ropes. Aslan looked more like himself without them. Every moment his dead face looked nobler. As the light grew and they could see it better. In the wood behind them, a bird gave a chuckling sound. It had been so still for hours and hours that it startled them. Then another bird answered it. Soon there were birds singing all over the place. It was quite definitely early morning now, not late night. I'm so cold, said Lucy. So am I, said Susan. Let's walk about a bit. They walked to the eastern edge of the hill and looked down. The one big star had almost disappeared. The country all looked dark gray, but beyond, at the very end of the world, the sea showed pale. The sky began to turn red. They walked to and fro more times than they could count between the dead Aslan and the eastern ridge, trying to keep warm. And how tired their legs felt. Then at last, as they stood for a moment looking out towards the sea, the red turned to gold along the line where the sea and the sky met, and very slowly up came the edge of the sun. At that moment, they heard from behind them a loud noise, a great cracking, deafening noise, as if a giant had broken a giant's plate. "What's that?" said Lucy, clutching Susan's arm. I feel afraid to turn around, said Susan. Something awful is happening. They're doing something worse to him, said Lucy. Come on, and she turned, pulling Susan round with her. The rising of the sun had made everything look so different. All the colors and shadows were changed, that for a moment they didn't see the important thing. Then they did. The stone table was broken in 2 pieces by a great crack that ran down it from end to end, and there was no Aslan. "Oh, oh, oh," cried the 2 girls, rushing back to the table. "Oh, it's too bad," sobbed Lucy. "They might have left the body alone." "Who's done it?" cried Susan. "What does it mean? Is it more magic?" "Yes," said a great voice behind their backs. "It is more magic." They looked around. There, shining in the sunrise, larger than they had been, there, shining in the sunrise, larger than they had seen him before, shaking his mane, was Aslan himself. Aren't you dead then, dear Aslan? Said Lucy. Not now, said Aslan. You're not said Susan in a shaky voice. She couldn't bring herself to say the word ghost. Aslan stooped his golden head and licked her forehead. The warmth of his breath and a rich sort of smell that seemed to hang about his hair came all over her. Do I look it? He said. Oh, you're real! You're real! Oh, Aslan! Cried Lucy, and both girls flung themselves upon him and covered him with kisses. But what does it all mean? Asked Susan when they were somewhat calmer. It means, said Aslan, that though the witch knew the deep magic, there is a magic deeper still which she did not know. Her knowledge goes back only to the dawn of time. But if she could have looked a little further back into the stillness and the darkness before time dawned, she would have read a different incantation. She would have known that when a willing victim who had committed no treachery was killed in a traitor's stead, the table would crack and death itself would start working backwards. And the fourth and final reading is from the Voyage of the Dawn Treader. The new creation. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has, I'm going to start over. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has gone, the new has come. In Edmund and Lucy's last adventure in Narnia, they are joined by their cousin, Eustace Clarence Scrubb. I'll begin reading. There was a boy called Eustace Clarence Scrubb, and he almost deserved it. His parents called him Eustace Clarence, and his schoolmasters called him Scrubb. I can't tell you how his friends spoke to him, for he had none. He didn't call his father and mother father and a mother, but Harold and Alberta. They were very up-to-date and advanced people. They were vegetarians, non-smokers, teetotalers, and wore a special kind of underclothes. In their house, there was very little furniture and very few clothes on the beds, and the windows were always open. Eustace Clarence liked animals, especially beetles, if they were dead and pinned on a card. He liked books, if they were books of information and had pictures of grain elevators or of fat foreign children doing exercises in model schools. Eustace Clarence disliked his cousins, the four Pevensies, Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy. But he was quite glad when he heard that Edmund and Lucy were coming to stay. For deep down, he liked bossing and bullying, and though he was a puny little person who couldn't have stood up even to Lucy, let alone Edmund, in a fight, he knew that there are dozens of ways to give people a bad time if you are in your own home and they are only visitors. And then later, Eustace is transformed into a dragon because of his greed. He is unable to restore himself to boyhood. Aslan must do it for him. So this is Eustace speaking to me. I won't tell you how I became a dragon till I can tell the others and get it all over, said Eustace. By the way, I didn't even know it was a dragon till I heard you all using the word when I turned up here the other morning. I want to tell you how I stopped being one. Fire ahead, said Edmund. Well, last night I was more miserable than ever, and that beastly arm ring was hurting like anything. Is that all right now? Eustace laughed, a different laugh from any Edmund had heard him give before, and slipped the bracelet easily off his arm. There it is, he said, and anyone who likes can have it as far as I'm concerned. Well, as they say, I was lying awake and wondering what on earth would become of me. And then, but mind you, it may have been all a dream. I don't know. Go ahead, said Edmund with considerable patience. Well, anyway, I looked up and saw the very last thing I expected. A huge lion coming slowly towards me. And one queer thing was that there was no moon that last night. But there was moonlight where the lion was. So it came nearer and nearer. I was terribly afraid of it. You may think that being a dragon, I could have knocked any lion out easily enough. But it wasn't that kind of fear. I wasn't afraid of its eating me. I was just afraid of it. If you can understand. Well, it came closer up to me and looked straight into my eyes. And I shut my eyes tight, but that wasn't any good because it told me to follow it. You mean it spoke? I don't know. Now that you mention it, I don't think it did, but it told me all the same. And I knew I would have to do what it told me. So I got up and followed it. And it led me a long way into the mountains. And there was always this moonlight over and round the lion wherever we went. So at last we came to the top of the mountain I'd never seen before, and on top of this mountain there was a garden. Trees and fruits and everything. In the middle of it, there was a well. I knew it was a well because you could see the water bubbling up from the bottom of it. But it was a lot bigger than most wells, like a very big round bath with marble steps going down into it. The water was as clear as anything. And I thought if I could get in there and bathe, it would ease the pain in my leg. But the lion told me I must undress first. Mind you, I don't know if he said any words out loud or not. I was just going to say that I couldn't undress because I hadn't any clothes on when I suddenly thought that dragons are snaky sorts of things and snakes can cast their skins. Oh, of course, thought I, that's what the lion means. So I started scratching myself and my scales began coming off all over the place. And then I scratched a little deeper, and instead of just scales coming off here and there, my whole skin started peeling off beautifully, like it does after an illness, or if I was a banana. In a minute or two, I just stepped out of it. I could see it lying there beside me, looking rather nasty. But it was a most lovely feeling. So I started to go down into the well for my bath. But just as I was going to put my foot into the water, I looked down and saw that it was all hard and rough and wrinkled and scaling just as it had been before. "Oh, that's all right," said I. "It only means I had another smaller suit on underneath the first one, and I'll have to get out of it too." So I scratched and tore again, and this underskin peeled off beautifully, and out I stepped and left it lying beside the other one, and went down to the well for my bath. Well, exactly the same thing happened again. And I thought to myself, oh dear, however many skins have I to take off, for I'm longing to bathe my leg. So I scratched away for the third time and got off the third skin, just like the two others, and stepped out of it. But as soon as I looked at myself in the water, I knew it had been no good. Then the lion said, but I don't know if it spoke, "You will have to let me undress you." I was afraid of his claws, I can tell you, but I was pretty nearly desperate now. So I just lay flat down on my back to let him do it. The very first tear he made was so deep that I thought it had gone right into my heart. And when he began pulling the skin off, it hurt worse than anything I've ever felt. The only thing that made me able to bear it was just the pleasure of feeling the stuff peel off. You know, if you've ever picked a scab of a sore place, it hurts like billy-o, but it is such fun to see it coming away. "I know exactly what you mean," said Edmund. Well, he peeled the beastly stuff right off, just as I thought I'd done it myself the other 3 times, only they hadn't hurt. And there it was, lying on the grass, only ever so much thicker and darker and more knobbly looking than the others had been. And there was I, as smooth and soft as a peeled switch, and smaller than I had been. Then he caught hold of me. I didn't like that much, for I was very tender underneath now that I had no skin on, and threw me into the water. It smarted like anything, but only for a moment. After that, it became perfectly delicious, and as soon as I started swimming and splashing, I found that all the pain had gone from my arm. And then I saw why. I turned into a boy again. And you'd think me simply phony if I told you how I felt about my own arm. I know they're no muscle and are pretty moldy compared with Caspian's, but I was so glad to see them. After a bit, the lion took me out and dressed me. Dressed you with his paws? Well, I don't exactly remember that bit, but he did somehow or other, in new clothes, the same I've got on as a matter of fact, and then suddenly I was back here, which is what makes me think it must have been a dream. No, it wasn't a dream, said Edmund. Why not? Well, there are the clothes for one thing, and you have been, well, undragoned for another. It would be nice and fairly nearly true to say that from that time forth, Eustace was a different boy. To be strictly accurate, he began to be a different boy. He had relapses. There were still many days when he could be very tiresome. But though most of those I shall not notice, the cure had begun.
We went into overtime today. We'll see you next week, and we promise we'll get some more chairs, so please come back. Thank you.